Hey, all right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Charles E. Smith Jr. You're hanging in the Inside Sports Studio. It's time for another edition of Football Talk. Almost done. Only 2 weeks to go, so let's go ahead and get right into things here. I do not do this show alone. I enlist, of course, the best talent around. None other than Chris Lardieri of FootballNation.com. And also you can follow him on Twitter at Chris L. Sports. Without further ado, here is the man. Mr. Lardieri, what's happening?
Charles, yet again, thanks for a phenomenal intro. Can't believe there's only 2 weeks left in the regular season, so let's hope we get our money's worth from the NFL.
All right. Well, you know what? First, let's go ahead and give you your props. FootballNation.com, your great column, FN Follies, which I absolutely adore. Talk to me. What have we got this week?
Adore, that's even better.
Yes.
Thank you very much. To the column, this week's column, which will be hitting the site tomorrow morning, Thursday, should the New York Jets get rid of Mark Sanchez? And you know, Charles, every week I go to write my column, and inevitably there are two topics that seem to come up over and over again, the Jets and the San Diego Chargers, and it's fitting that they play each other this week. Someone, I guess, has to win that game. But just the uproar coming out of New York with the media vultures saying to get rid of Sanchez in light of Rex Ryan benching him in favor of Greg McElroy after that atrocious performance against the Titans, 4 interceptions, costly fumble late. And I say, you know what, you can hem and haw all you want, you can point fingers, but the guy is due to make, depending upon if they were to cut him and when, somewhere in the neighborhood of a $12 million cap figure, so he's not going anywhere. And you want to blame anyone, as I've said before, you blame Mike Tannenbaum for extending the guy's contract when he was kind of coming off a up-and-down mediocre season at best, and now look at the mess they've made. They bring in Tebow, that's blown up in their face. He's now a third stringer. So, you know, you could talk all you want. The columnist in the New York Post, for instance, in the back page, saying he needs to go, Sanchez instead of Sanchez. So, you know what? He's not going anywhere is the moral of the story, and Jets fans better just accept it, and they better get some talent around him, too.
Well, you know, and that's one thing. When I'm looking at all these stories and things online, I hear the Jets are possibly pondering dumping both him and Tebow. But as you say, there's the salary cap ramifications and things like that. I think if it makes some type of financial sense, maybe between that and winning versus a fan revolt, I think you might have to, you know, do what you have to do to get him off the roster and go ahead and eat whatever millions of dollars you're going to have to eat because of it, and just write it off as a bad investment. I mean, that's sometimes you got to do that. Yeah,
the problem is they have cap problems in addition to that. I mean, look at what they're paying Santonio Holmes, for instance, and what he's going to count against the cap next year. So, you know, I could see teams doing that, but they got a big hole to dig out of. So that is a train wreck that just grows by the week.
All right. Well, you know what? Let's go ahead and you know, we'll keep on kind of the same line. So another club that was having a little bit of trouble, and that was the Baltimore Ravens. They lost 2 straight games. They fired Cam Cameron. Then they come out last week, and they get handled by the Denver Broncos. So what do you think about, first of all, that move of them firing Cam Cameron, which I was in favor of because their offense never seemed to make much sense as far as there was never really a good flow or rhythm to it under Cameron. But what do you think of that move?
You know, it's almost like it had to be done, but what good is it going to do now? I mean, they probably should have done it a little earlier in the year. Flacco's had his issues with him, but this late in the season, well, what can really be done? I mean, this is another team that's just on a downward spiral, and it just gets worse and worse every week. I mean, they weren't utilizing Ray Rice as much, and now Flacco is not getting the job done like he was earlier this year, like when he beat the Patriots, for instance. So, you know, it might be a case of biting off your nose to spite your face, but what are they to do? Someone had to be made the fall guy here, much like a defensive coordinator with the Eagles. But, you know, ultimately the players have to turn things around, and you can blame coordinators all you want, but this team is just not executing on either side of the ball.
Right, and then you also have the, you know, the Steelers, who Ben Roethlisberger, you know, they lose a kind of a heartbreaker in overtime to the Cowboys. Well, to me, Roethlisberger, I don't think that shoulder is quite right yet. It really isn't. But he kind of called out Todd Haley for the way that the flow of their offense went, and going away from the you know going away from the no huddle and going back to the huddle thing as soon as the Steelers seemed to have some momentum going, and Haley changed things up, and I think Roethlisberger got a little bit upset about that. So, the whole offensive coordinator thing, it just continues to spiral around.
Yeah, and Roethlisberger wasn't very happy when the Steelers got rid of Bruce Arians, who's now doing a great job as pretty much interim coach in Indianapolis. And on top of that, Haley's not let's just say he's not really Mr. Personality. He's had his run-ins with players at other places, unceremoniously dumped in Kansas City. But, he's got a point. It goes back to the Ravens and Flacco. If the no-huddle works, why not use it? I mean, we've seen Peyton Manning make a heck of a nice career out of it. And, so even if things do work out in Pittsburgh, when your quarterback's calling you out, it might be time to update the resume.
Yeah, now, this is a good lead-in. Now, someone who works for part of my research team gets me all kinds of little tidbits that I throw out on the air here and there. That's Matt Della Russo, and what he said about the Steelers, and this was after they had lost to the Chargers, before this loss to the Cowboys. He said, after they lost to the Chargers, it's like I've been saying since week one. They just aren't that good. Is that possibly one of the problem with the Steelers being 7-7? Is it the injuries, or are they just not as good a team as a lot of people thought they were?
You know what? I think they're a good team. They're not dominant like they used to be, but I really think injuries have hurt them. And you look, Mike Wallace at the beginning of the year really couldn't get things going, and now with the problems with Antonio Brown, missing Polamalu for so long in the secondary. I know he's back, but is he really at full game strength like the Polamalu we know? I don't know, but I do know the team that beat the Giants about halfway through the season looked pretty darn good. There's also a team that's had massive offensive line problems and only got a couple of their starters back just this week. So I would err more on the side of injuries and kind of chemistry and meshing and a result of that. But there's talent on that team, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Right, and then there's the issues when you look at their running back situation with Mendenhall, coming back, then playing only a little, then fumbling, and then being suspended for a week. And now I guess they're trying to work out a new contract with him. So there's a lot more turmoil than we're used to seeing going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are normally a pretty sound organization.
Yeah, and I know there have been some in the media who've kind of been criticizing Tomlin for the coaching job he's done this year, including the whole head games with Mendenhall. But you know what? At the end of the day, you need Mendenhall. I know they've got some nice running backs behind him, but this is a guy who's put up numbers before, and when he's healthy, he's clearly a number one back in the NFL. So wouldn't be alienating him right now.
All right. Well, it looks like they're patching that up. And, let's go ahead and talk about, we talked about the Ravens, but another team is the Bears in the NFC. So we got to really talk about the Ravens and the Bears. Are they still legitimate contenders? They've both lost 3 straight. You got the Bears, who started off, I think, winning 7 of their first 8 games. Now they've lost 5 of 6. What's going on there? We talked a little about the Ravens, but what about the Bears?
With the Bears, when they had one loss, and there were actually people saying they were the best team in the NFC and finally Super Bowl contenders again, I think you and I had talked about it one week. The offensive line stinks, and say what you will about Jay Cutler, but when the guy's under pressure, I don't care if he's got Brandon Marshall to throw to. If you don't have time to throw, forget about it. And the running game's been up and down all year. Now Michael Bush is gone for the year. Forte hasn't been what he has in previous years. And with injuries on the defensive side, especially Urlacher, I just do not see them as being a contender. And don't get me wrong, the Packers did everything they could to let the Bears back into that game last Sunday, but they just couldn't do it. Some of it probably falls on Cutler's fault. He had to make some conversions on third down that he didn't really throw the ball well. But ultimately, you cannot be beating the Seahawks late in the game and let Russell Wilson drive the field to tie it and then win the game. Like, that can't be happening if you're a contender, and I don't think they are.
Yeah, and you know what? If we talk about the Seahawks, I mean, having put up 50 points in back-to-back weeks, first time in a long time that's even happened at all in the NFL. But it seemed like Now that game, the controversial win they had, the Monday night game against Green Bay, which ultimately got the officials back a few days later, and everyone thought the Seahawks were pretty much pretenders at that point, but they've actually gone on a nice run since then. Now they're 9-5 in what's a really packed up NFC. So, what do we think about the Seahawks?
I think they're for real. I know even in our kind of preseason analysis of the NFC, I thought they might be a team if the chips fall where they may, that they might be able to sneak in as a wild card, and it looks like now they're going to be a wild card. And they've done it with a tremendous defense. Not a lot of people know about it. They've got some playmakers on that defense. Irvin, for one, highly touted out of college, has really developed. Even with their potential suspensions in the secondary, it looks like they've timed them right. So perhaps they'll have one of those guys, I believe Brower, back in time for the playoffs. And on top of that, Marshawn Lynch has really revitalized his career up there. So you got a good defense, solid running game. They always win at home, it seems. And Russell Wilson has really matured into a quality NFL quarterback. So much for the quarterback needs to have height theory. He's really proven everyone wrong. So it should be a great game Sunday night against the 49ers. And as we said in pre-production, whatever NBC paid to have the ability to flex out a game like Jets-Chargers is worth every single penny.
Absolutely. And what I like about the Seahawks is when you talk about their defense, we kind of knew about that from early on in the season. But it was about that offense really getting going and what Russell Wilson could do. And they were kind of the equivalent, if you look at it, it was like the Bears, where you had their offense, which was kind of the stable part of the game, or excuse me, the defense was a stable part of the game, and then you had the offense just needed to do what they needed to do. But now that offense just really came together. So when we look at teams getting on runs late in the season, I'm not ready to say that the Seahawks might do that thing, but a heck of a football team there, and they got the last two games at home, haven't lost at home yet this season.
Yeah, exactly. And as opposed to Wilson doing the proverbial managing the game, he's now making plays to win the game.
Right.
And another guy I forgot to mention is Golden Tate. Everyone who had thought his career was over and done with after a brief amount of time, and he's really stepped up to play well as well, along with Sidney Rice on the other side of the ball. So they got some weapons there, and they're gelling at the right time. They're making a run, and we'll see what happens Sunday. It's what it's all about. A big matchup between two powerful teams.
Yep. So you got that wild card race. I mean, the Seahawks at 9-5, and then you got bunched up at 8-6. The Bears, the Redskins, the Cowboys, the Giants, and the Vikings. And speaking of the Vikings, how about Adrian Peterson? I mean, here 2 games left. He's got 1,812 yards. It's almost a foregone conclusion that he's going to get to 2,000. But the question is, you got that hallowed mark of 2105. Set by Eric Dickerson way back when.
Yeah, it should be interesting. And I know Greg Jennings of the Packers said this week, he wants to beat the Vikings, but he hopes Peterson breaks the record, which is very nice. I'm sure his defense appreciated that. But Packers' run defense isn't all that stout, so he might make up a big chunk of that this week. So you know what? Good for him. I think it's a great story if he does do it, to come back from really just tearing his knee up literally a year ago this coming weekend, to now where he's not only comeback player of the year, he's one of the front runners for MVP. So he's carried this team on his shoulder, because Christian Ponder hasn't really played great down the stretch. Ultimately, this guy gets the ball, and he's been ripping off 80-plus yard touchdown runs, and just carrying that team on his back, a la Dickerson back in the 83.
Yep, right around there.
Yeah.
83, 84.
84, I think, yeah. Yeah, he was a rookie in 83, you're right.
Yeah, I was just a kid back then. I think I was 6. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I remember him with his neck roll around his neck and his goggles.
And right, and he had one of the nicest Jerry curls ever in the history of the National Football League too. I mean, I don't know how much time that brother spent in the salon getting that Jerry curl, but that curl was tight, man.
It's true, and if Marcus Dupree had panned out in the NFL, he would have competed for that title.
And I would have to say the best non-Negro Jerry curl I ever saw. Would that be Todd Christensen back around the same time?
Wow, I was thinking that as soon as those words came out of your mouth. Absolutely. He had a curly mullet for sure.
And of course, in baseball, it was Don Sutton. But we're not talking about baseball. This is football talk here.
That's right.
Okay, so anything before we get into the pick segment here?
On a serious note, given the tragedy that happened in Newtown, Connecticut last week, I was reading the story about Jack Pinto, the 6-year-old boy who tragically died and was such a huge Giants and Victor Cruz fan. He wanted to be buried. The family buried him in his number 80 jersey. And I was reading the stories about how Victor Cruz drove up there on his off day yesterday and met with the family and insisted that it not be covered by the media and no publicity, and just talking about how much it changed his life. And we always talk about the knuckleheads in this game, and there are plenty of them given the events of the past 2 weeks with the Chiefs and the Cowboys. But this is one of the good guys, and I know I'm a Giants fan and all, but just reading this, even lots of people I've talked to, Raiders fans, Cowboy fans, are the same thing. I mean, just a genuinely good guy, and I think more people need to take note of that not everyone in the NFL is bad. And to read a story like this, as heartbreaking as it is, really touched my heart. So kudos to you, Victor Cruz.
And you know what? I think there's a lot of in a lot of the sports, there are a lot of athletes who do things like that. And here's two different things though. It's one thing to do something, out of the goodness of your heart and do it like for a family in a situation. It's another thing to alert the media whenever you're going to do something and make sure that they're out there to cover it. So a lot of these guys, they don't necessarily want the total credit, so to speak, in the tabloids or in the papers or online or anything. They just quietly do the things that they're going to do, and there's just kind of little fanfare around it. And unfortunately, because of that, the flip side is all we hear is the sensationalism.
Yeah, definitely. Or they leak it to the Jay Glazers of Chris Mortensons of the world and get their message out there that way. But yeah, I was also reading how Cruz found out via Twitter about it the night before the game in Atlanta, and put a little tribute on his shoes. So social media actually having a relevant impact on society for once.
Well, social media, it is good, but there's a dark side to it, as we know, and it can be a real breeding ground for codependency. But I could spend a half hour on that. I won't get into it.
Yeah, there are going to be lots of college classes on that very topic. I can see it now.
Yep. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the picks segment here with the picks of the week. Of course, we got the contest going, and you know what, folks? The best thing about our pick segment is different from all the others because it's not about necessarily being the overall winner in the pick segment. So we don't make picks based on mathematical equations. We look at who exactly we think is going to win the games, and that's why you watch, because it's about our expertise transferring into the picks, not us trying to win a contest. That's a whole different thing, because we run this show with the utmost integrity, because that's how we roll here. That's just how we do things.
That's absolutely right, Charles. We are not running any sort of quantitative algorithm here. We just want to win. And as infuriated as I get when you have the almost identical or exact picks that I do on a given week, I respect that great minds think alike.
All right, so the standings after Week 15, 2 weeks to go. I've got a 3-game lead, man. But you know what? Things are getting shaky, and there's some tough games coming up this week. I'm 61-35. My man Chris is 58-38. So let's go ahead and get into it. First game we're going to pick, Minnesota at Houston. This should be a good battle because we got two of the great running backs in the game. Of course, Arian Foster for Houston, all-day Adrian Peterson for Minnesota. I'll go ahead and put my pick out for this game first, and here's what I think is going to happen. I like the way Adrian Peterson runs, obviously. And I think what we're going to see is exactly what Jennings had talked about, and that is we're going to see Adrian Peterson. I think he's going to put up probably 130, 140 yards rushing against Houston. However, the way that Houston's defense plays, I think that's going to frustrate Ponder. And I don't think they're going to be able to get it done through the air, so it's going to render them one-dimensional. And therefore, I like the Texans to beat the Vikings. Adrian Peterson having a great game, But the other pieces that aren't there for the Vikings, I think, are going to hurt them again in this game against the Texans.
Yet again, I agree with you. I'm going with the Texans. Peterson may run all over them. It's sort of homecoming for him. He lives in Houston. He's looking forward to the game. I've heard him interviewed. But ultimately, the teams that have lit up the Texans, namely the Patriots and the Packers, did it through the air. And I do not see Christian Ponder beating this Texans defense, and I think he's going to get a rude introduction to Mr. J.J. Watt.
Yeah, or J.J. SWAT, as
Right.
he's called, for knocking those balls out of the air. All right, so we're in agreement on that. We both got Houston. Next game, though, the Bengals 8-6 at the Steelers. Steelers at 7-7. Steelers, they can win these last couple of games. They'll get into the playoffs, and we know 9-7 teams can win Super Bowls. So how do you see this one? The Bengals at the Steelers, a big division rivalry that goes back years. Talk to me.
I think this is going to be a tough game. I'm picking the Steelers mainly because I don't think Andy Dalton, don't have the confidence in Dalton to beat the Steelers. I think even though their defense is fairly porous last week against the Cowboys, Dalton doesn't scare me like a Tony Romo does. I think they'll get the stops they need. I think the rust will come off Roethlisberger. He showed some flashes of brilliance last week, namely in that 9-second play, scurrying around the pocket and then hitting Heath Miller for the touchdown. I think the ground game gets figured out, and you know what? Backs against the wall. My money's on my proverbial money, I should say, is on the Steelers.
Proverbial, because we here do not advocate gambling in any way, shape, or form, because that's bad. Yes.
Well, on top of that, it's Christmas, and I've got no money to gamble with anyway, but I digress.
Yes, you do, don't you? All right. Well, really, I got to go with you on that. I think pressure-packed game. This is the Steelers. The Steelers have lost 2 in a row. This is their get-right game here. The Steelers at home against the Bengals, and a high-pressure game. And we know Roethlisberger, he's played in 3 Super Bowls. He's used to this type of thing. You got to go with the experience versus Cincinnati. Home game for the Steelers. I go for the Steelers also. So we're in agreement on this one as well. Let's go ahead and move on. The Cowboys, one of those teams in the mix in that big NFC. The Saints, 6-8, at the Cowboys. The Cowboys at 8-6, but the Saints come in with that passing attack. And, well, here I think the upset is going to happen. Well, actually, I haven't seen the line. However, I'm picking the 6-8 Saints to go in and beat the Cowboys. I know the Cowboys need this game. The Saints they're out of the playoff race. But this is the type of a game where I've seen the Cowboys, they go and lay an egg. They had the big emotional win against the Steelers last week, a game they really needed. And I think this week, though, the Saints, fresh off of having a big game last week, I think they're go into Dallas. They're playing on turf, which they're used to. And I think they're going to take down the Cowboys this week.
Finally, we disagree on one, and I'm, again, picking with my head here. I'm going with Dallas. I think that this team, for whatever reason, has gotten its act together on offense. Personally, I think it's a return of DeMarco Murray, who they've really missed this season, and I think that's taken a lot of pressure off of Romo. I think they'll be able to light up the porous New Orleans defense, and the sheer fact that they win, they set up a pivotal win-in-you're-in type game in D.C. against RG3 and the Redskins coming up, looking to get some revenge over that Thanksgiving Day spanking that they received. So I think that'll happen. It could be a shootout like it was against the Steelers last week.
Mm-hmm.
I could see Breeze easily lighting up this Dallas defense. Not impressed with Rob Ryan, his messy haircut, or his defense. But I think the Cowboys do it at home. They seem to be on some sort of a roll. And in the bigger picture, we need to realize this should be renamed the Sean Payton Bowl, because I'm guessing he'll be coaching one of these 2 teams in 2013.
All right. Well, you know what? I like those reasons. This was one of those games I was on the fence on, but I'm going with the Saints. And one thing is, I'm still not sold on Romo playing in pressure-packed games. And they won last week, but I think this is a game where the pressure is going to get to him. And I like the Saints, but you know what? It's going to be fun to watch in any case.
Definitely.
Okay, now here's an old school division rivalry. The Bills 5-9, the Dolphins 6-8. Now the Dolphins do still have an outside chance at the playoffs. What would have to happen is the Steelers would have to beat the Bengals this week and then lose their final game to, I believe they're playing Cleveland, and then the Bengals would have to lose also next week, and the Dolphins win both their last two games, and they would be in. It's as simple as that. But Bills at the Dolphins. What do you think about the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills?
I'm going with the Finns. I think the Bills are another team in a tailspin, not getting it done offensively, and all that money they spent on the defensive side of the ball hasn't panned out. I mean, for the Seahawks to light them up like that, it's fairly embarrassing. Not typical Bills style football. Let's say that, you know, that they were known for having good defense, and this team just can't seem to stop anyone. So I'm going with the Dolphins. They're at home. Tannehill's had a quietly nice season for a rookie quarterback. Definitely not of the Luck or RG3 variety, but
No.
you know, he's held his own for a guy that everyone had doubted coming out of Texas A&M. So I'm going with Miami.
All right, Texas A&M. I think there's a Johnny Football guy who goes there, isn't there? Or something like that.
Yeah. His
anyways.
name escapes me. He won an award of some sort.
Yeah, Heisman, I think it's called.
Thiesman, that's right.
Okay, well, I got to go with the Dolphins as well, and really, I think the Dolphins they're going to be kicking themselves when the season is over. If you just think about, and speaking of kicking, Dan Carpenter, excuse me. If he had just made some of those field goals in the first few games, they would be in the driver's seat for a playoff spot. But you know what? If the ifs and buts were candy and nuts, it'd be Christmas every day. It's not like that. But I like the Dolphins in this game at home, and I like the way that the team is moving these days. So I'm going to go with the Dolphins as well.
All right, we're back on track.
Okay. So next game, and here's one. The Chargers. The battle of the implosions here. The Chargers at the Jets. Chargers at 5-9. The Jets at 6-8. I'll tell you how I'm going to pick this game. I'm not going to flip a coin, but I'll just say that the team. Well, but then again, Ryan Matthews just went out for the Chargers this week, so they have no running game anymore. Not that they really had one before. So I think instead of going. I was going to say I'm going to take the team with a quarterback versus a team without one, but I think I'm going to go with the Jets on this game. I'm going to go with the Jets and say that the team with their third-string quarterback versus the team without a running back, since they're playing at home, they're going to win. I'll say that.
Yet again, you're reading my mind. As much as it pains me to pick the Jets, I wanted to pick C, none of the above, but we can't do that here in the contest. So I'm going with the Jets for exactly the reason you hit on. Not that Ryan Matthews scares anyone, but who's going to run the ball?
Right.
Floyd's also out. And, you know, Rivers played well in Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago and then reverted back to the mean last week. I just feel the Chargers have mailed it in. You know, say what you will about the Jets, they still seem to have some semblance of pride left on that team, even the defensive side of the ball. And I think McElroy, you know, might be auditioning for a full-time job next year. So, you know, when in the limited playing opportunities he's gotten, he's managed to get the team into the end zone, which is more we could say about Sanchez. So I'll go with the Jets as well.
All right, and yeah, I couldn't believe the way that game ended on Monday night. That was the Titans couldn't even give them that game. They punt the ball and give them the ball on the 25-yard line with, 48 seconds to play, and what happens? They fumble the snap and game is over. But let's not relive that. Let's go ahead and move on. The big games of the day. Oh, the Giants at 8-6 at the Ravens. The Ravens are kind of reeling, having lost 3 straight. Can they get right at home against the Giants? And the Giants, we know about their late season runs, which leads to late season glory, which leads to another chapter in the book of Eli, possibly. But what's going to happen this week, man?
This is a tough one to pick. I mean, you got two teams that are coming off just spankings and embarrassments. I'm going with the Giants mainly because I think the Ravens' problems are far bigger. They've got their defense, as we know, is banged up. Their offense isn't clicking at all. The Giants had an off week, and like I've said before, they're the kid that studies for the final exam the night before the test and always manages to pull out a good grade. I think that happens here. I think the defense has faced a lot of criticism in New York, and for whatever reason, that side of the ball loves to get criticized and doubted, and they just come out and prepare. And I'm namely thinking of Week 16 last year against the New York Jets. So going with the Giants, I think they're going to do yet another one of their late season rallies. Don't know if they'll get in the playoffs, but if they want to, they better start here and beat the Ravens down in Baltimore.
Yeah, and you know what? I was talking this over with a colleague of mine, and I said there are 4 quarterbacks that I would take in a big game if I really needed something. The 4 quarterbacks: Eli Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and Ben Roethlisberger. It'd have to be one of those 4 if I had a game that I really needed to win in a pressure situation. I did not put Peyton Manning in there because of his big game pressure. He's not been the best, but I like Eli Manning to get right against this team, a team really that's lost their entire linebacking core. Because Jamil McClain is out now, T. Sizzle's out, Ray Lewis is out, and then Ladarius Webb has been out for weeks and weeks. So I think they're soft enough so that Eli Manning, with his receivers, they can pick apart the Ravens defense, which is really living on reputation and running on fumes at this point, versus Flacco, who knows that he has to put points up on the board because his defense is not there to bail him out. I like that front 7 of the Giants getting after Flacco, and I like Eli Manning taking advantage of the depleted Baltimore defense. This is the perfect storm. I like the Giants not only to win, but I like the Giants to win this game by 10 points. 10 points.
I like it. You've quantified it. Very precise. And one more thing I forgot to add. Giants secondary was completely banged up last week, so I'm hearing Kenny Phillips will be back. So I don't think they can be as porous as they possibly were last week down in Atlanta.
All right, and the last game we're going to pick here, the 49ers. Niners at 10-3-1, coming off that big win that they almost gave back to the Patriots last week against the Seahawks. Seahawks 2 straight weeks of 50 points. Battle of young quarterbacks here. I'm still, with the Seahawks and their home record, something magical happens there in Seattle. And when you look at the 49ers, the way they played last week against the Patriots, really kind of almost gave that game away. When they're playing up there in Seattle with that 12th man being their crowd, Kaepernick being a young quarterback, I'm liking the Seahawks to win this game. And they've still got a shot at winning the division if they do win this game. I'm liking the Seahawks to win this game over the 49ers. Big, huge Sunday night tilt.
Yet again, I hate to agree with you because I won't make up a game in the standings no matter what happens. But for all those reasons, I'm going with the Seahawks. On top of that, the first time they met this season, which was a total snoozer, was one of those games where the 49ers really gave the Seahawks every opportunity to win. Russell Wilson, early in the season, early in his career, wasn't able to capitalize on it. A lot of turnovers, sloppy game. But I don't think that happens. And like you said, there's just something about them at home. They're on a roll, and I could easily see that defense rattling Kaepernick this week.
All right, well, there you have it, and we've pretty much agreed on every game but one. I took New Orleans to go into Dallas and win that game. You kind of wanted to go with the Cowboys because you believe so heartily in Tony Romo, but, that's just you, not me.
It's not that I believe in Romo. I just believe that Romo will win this week and get me one game closer to you. And I have a real moral dilemma rooting for the Cowboys, as you know. But that speaks to my integrity and my objectivity in my pick. So I hope I'm proven right in that respect.
There you go. All right. And by the way, everybody, Mr. Lardieri does have the utmost integrity. I can vouch for him. So before we go ahead and sign off here, Chris, footballnation.com. You can also follow him on Twitter at Chris L Sports. Follow me on Twitter at The Inside Sports. So, Chris, anything before we sign off here?
Yeah, 2 things. I've actually taken my Chris L Sports to the blogosphere. You can follow me there at chrislsports.blogspot.com. I will link to my columns. I throw in a few random observations about anything sports. I mean, I commented on a baseball signing last week. I won't waste your time here as we only talk the NFL. But you can also follow me there now. And one final thing, I mentioned this in my FN Follies column, which you can find tomorrow on FootballNation.com. My new least favorite ubiquitous commercial is the Drew Brees Pepsi commercial with some boy band named One Direction, which thankfully I know nothing about other than their this decade's version of New Kids on the Block. Apparently, not only does the commercial annoy me, it's the worst acting I've seen since anything that's on the CW network, and it made me realize that Drew Brees needs to stick to just criticizing Roger Goodell in the NFL.
There you go. Okay, everybody. So thanks for joining us for Football Talk. This is an Inside Sports production. And by the way, everybody, hey, have a Merry Christmas, safe and sane. And if you drink, don't drive. If you drive, don't drink. You know, all those little cliche things. But everybody have fun. Enjoy your family and holidays. I'm sure Mr. Lardieri would agree with me.
Absolutely. Merry Christmas. Enjoy. And next week, we'll have one more week of football to look forward to. And we are not taking time off for the holidays. We will be here.
Yep. There you go. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. For Chris Lardieri, I'm Charles E. Smith, Jr. This has been Football Talk, which is an Inside Sports production. See ya and Merry Christmas.